Imagine walking from Texas to Washington, D.C. on foot, in the rain, in the snow, through summer heat and winter storms, for 108 days straight. No high-tech gear, no running shoes, some of them barefoot. Now, imagine doing all of that and smiling. In late 2025, a group of about 24 Buddhist monks set out from Fort Worth, Texas, on a journey that would span roughly 3,700 kilometers across 10 American states. They called it the Walk for Peace. And by the time they reached the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., on February 10, 2026, millions of people around the world were watching, moved, confused, and deeply curious. How? How do you walk that far, through freezing storms and blazing highways, without collapsing? The answer isn't in a lab or a gym. It's in a set of ancient Buddhist practices, most of which you've probably never heard of. And the wild part, some of them are things you can actually start using today. Let's walk. 1. Kankamana. The art of walking without wasting a single step. Here's a question most people never think about. Do you know how to walk? Sounds ridiculous. But the monks on this pilgrimage didn't just put one foot in front of the other. They practiced something called Kankamana, a walking meditation technique that breaks every single step into 5 conscious phases: lifting, moving, lowering, touching, and pressing. Think about that for a second. 5 distinct moments of attention in every step you take. Multiply that by millions of steps over 3,700 kilometers, and you start to understand that this isn't casual strolling. This is precision engineering of the human body. The Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh used to describe this as kissing the earth with your feet. It sounds poetic, and it is. But it also does something very practical. It acts as a real-time biofeedback system. By paying full attention to the sole of the foot, the walker makes tiny, constant micro-adjustments. Pressure shifts before a blister can form. Weight distribution changes before a joint takes too much impact. The body self-corrects, step by step, mile after mile. And that's why a group of monks could walk farther than most ultramarathon runners ever will, and arrive with their bodies largely intact. Not because they were stronger, because they were paying attention. 2. Step breath. Synchronization, the engine you didn't know you had. If Kankamana is the steering wheel, breath synchronization is the engine. The monks coordinated their breathing with their footsteps in a very specific pattern, inhaling over 2 steps, exhaling over 2 or 3. This rhythm isn't random. It creates what researchers call movement economy, a state where the body's center of gravity stays remarkably stable, and the energy cost of walking drops dramatically. You know that feeling when you're hiking uphill and your breathing goes haywire, your steps get uneven, your heart rate spikes, and suddenly every meter feels like a battle? That's what happens when breath and movement fall out of sync. The monks never let that happen. Their breath was locked into their stride from the moment they left Fort Worth, Texas. Day 1. It's day 50, day 108, same rhythm, same calm. And here's what makes this relevant for you and me. You don't need to be on a spiritual pilgrimage to use this. Next time you go for a walk, try matching your inhale to 2 steps and your exhale to 3. It feels weird for about 30 seconds. Then something shifts. Your mind quiets down, your pace steadies, and the walk starts to feel almost effortless. That's what economy of movement feels like in your body. 3. Dhutanga, the ancient code that turns discomfort into power. All right, this is where things get serious. The word Dhutanga comes from Pali, the language of the oldest Buddhist scriptures, and it roughly translates to shaking off impurities. It's a set of 13 ascetic practices that the Buddha himself recommended for monks who wanted to push past their limits. Not to suffer for the sake of suffering, but to strip away everything that isn't essential. These 13 practices include things like wearing only robes made from discarded cloth, eating only what is received through alms, living in the forest, sleeping under trees, sleeping in cemeteries, and, here's the one that gets people, never lying down. Ever. During the Walk for Peace, at least 2 monks followed the practice called Nasajik Anga. which means they never lay down to sleep for the entire 108 days. Instead, they rested in a seated meditation posture at night, allowing the body to enter deep, restorative sleep while still keeping enough muscle tone to resume walking at dawn. To most of us, that sounds like torture. To these monks, it's training. It's a deliberate reprogramming of the relationship between comfort and rest. Because here's the insight buried in the Dhutanga. Your body doesn't actually need what you think it needs. Most of what we call need is habit, and habits can be rewired. That's not an invitation to go sleep sitting up tonight, but it is a powerful reminder that we underestimate what we're capable of because we rarely test it. 4. 1 meal a day. The metabolic reset that fueled the journey. You've heard of intermittent fasting. Silicon Valley loves it. Biohackers swear by it. But Buddhist monks were doing it roughly 25 centuries before anyone put it on a podcast. The practice is called Ekasanic Anga, and it's beautifully simple. Eat once a day before noon, nothing after that. And here's the kicker. You only eat what fits in your alms bowl. That's it. No seconds, no snacking, no exceptions. On the Walk for Peace, the monks followed this rule while walking roughly 32 to 37 kilometers per day. That's the equivalent of running a marathon on a single bowl of food. How is that even possible? When you eat once a day consistently, the body adapts. It shifts from burning glucose, which runs out fast, to burning stored fat for fuel. The insulin spikes that come with frequent meals disappear, and your energy stabilizes. No crashes, no afternoon slumps. The monks weren't optimizing their metabolism on purpose, at least not in a scientific sense. They were following a discipline designed to reduce attachment to food and strengthen self-control. But the biological result? Almost identical to what modern nutrition science now recommends for endurance performance. 2,500 years ahead of the curve. 5. Tummo, the inner furnace that defies winter. This one sounds like something out of a movie, but it's real, and it's been scientifically documented. When the Walk for Peace entered the Carolinas and Virginia in January and February of 2026, the monks walked straight into brutal winter storms. Snow, sleet, freezing rain, Arctic wind. Temperatures plummeted, major cities shut down, and 3 of the monks, including the group's leader, the Venerable Bhikkhu Panakara, walked through parts of this stretch barefoot, or in thin socks. Most people would lose toes. These monks didn't flinch. The technique behind this is called tummo, a Tibetan meditation practice often translated as inner heat or psychic fire. It involves visualizing flames rising along the central channel of the spine, combined with specific forced breathing patterns that activate brown adipose tissue, a type of fat in the body whose sole job is to generate heat without shivering. Dr. Herbert Benson, a researcher at Harvard University, studied tummo practitioners and found that trained monks could raise the peripheral temperature of their fingers and toes by as much as 8 degrees Celsius in cold environments. 8 degrees. That's the difference between frostbite and perfectly warm hands. And while most of us will never need to walk barefoot through a snowstorm, the underlying principle is fascinating. The mind can influence the body's thermostat, not as a metaphor, literally. Your brain, with the right training, can tell your body to produce more heat. The monks knew this long before science had a name for it. 6. Lung Gompa, when the body becomes wind. Now, we're entering territory that even seasoned meditators find hard to believe. Lung Gompa is a Tibetan practice whose name literally means wind meditation. In the early 20th century, the French-Belgian explorer Alexandre David Niel traveled through Tibet and reported witnessing monks who could cover enormous distances on foot, far beyond what should have been physically possible, in a trance-like state, moving at extraordinary speeds across high-altitude plateaus. The training for Lung Gompa takes years of isolation. Practitioners perform rhythmic jumping exercises and visualizations, where the body is imagined to become light, almost weightless. The gaze is locked on a single distant point, a star, the horizon, is a faraway mountain peak, which induces a mild, hypnotic state that suppresses the perception of pain and fatigue. The monks on the walk for peace weren't moving at supernatural speeds. They covered about 32 to 37 kilometers per day at a measured human pace. But the principles they used are direct descendants of the Lungompa tradition. A fixed gaze ahead, a pendulum-like cadence in their steps, a meditative absorption so deep that the body moves almost on autopilot while the mind rests. Think about that. The body walks, the mind rests at the same time. That's not exhaustion management. It's an entirely different operating system for the human machine. 7. Upika, the invisible shield against everything life throws at you. Physical endurance was only half the battle. Walking 3,700 kilometers also means dealing with public scrutiny, media attention, hostile weather, occasional hostility from strangers, and the slow psychological grind of doing the same thing, day after day, for over 3 months. The monks handled all of it with something Buddhists call upekkha, equanimity. And before you think that just means staying calm, let me be more specific. Equanimity, in the Buddhist sense, is the ability to remain fully present and engaged without being hijacked by emotional reactions. It's not indifference, it's not suppression, it's a kind of deep steadiness that lets you receive whatever comes, good or bad, without losing your center. Buddhist teachings describe 8 forces that constantly push and pull at the human mind: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disgrace. These are called the 8 worldly winds. Most of us spend our entire lives being blown around by them. We chase the pleasant ones, run from the painful ones, and never notice the pattern. The monks trained to stand still in all 8 winds. When 20,000 people greeted them with cheers in South Carolina, they didn't get swept up in the praise. When they walked in freezing rain with no one watching, they didn't sink into despair. Same pace, same presence, same internal calm. The leader, Bhikkhu Panakara, reportedly taught his fellow walkers to begin each day with a simple phrase: "Today is my day of peace." That's it. No complicated affirmation, no elaborate ritual. Just one sentence to anchor the mind before the road tested it again. Honestly, that one might be worth stealing for your Monday mornings. 8. Radical acceptance. What happens when you lose a leg and keep going? On day 25 of the pilgrimage near Dayton, Texas, something terrible happened. A truck collided with the monk's escort vehicle, and in the crash, a monk named Fra Ajahn Mahadam Fomasan lost his left leg. Let that land for a moment. 25 days into a 3,700-kilometer walk for peace, and one of the walkers has his leg amputated. Now, here's where this story takes a turn that most people don't expect. Fra Ajahn Mahadam didn't file a lawsuit. He didn't express anger or bitterness or resentment. According to reports, he said he was happy to offer his leg to the Buddha Sasana, the teachings of the Buddha. He viewed the loss not as a tragedy, but as an offering, and after his initial recovery, he rejoined the group to complete the journey. I know, that sounds almost impossible to wrap your head around. But this is the practice in action, not in a comfortable meditation room with candles and incense, but on the side of a Texas highway with sirens and blood and real, visceral pain. Buddhism teaches that suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our resistance to pain, from the gap between what is happening and what we think should be happening. Fra Ajahn Mahadam collapsed that gap completely. What happened, happened. And he met it with acceptance so total that it transformed a catastrophe into something he could hold with grace. This doesn't mean we should welcome suffering or ignore our own pain. But it does challenge a deep assumption most of us carry, that when things go wrong, the only reasonable response is to fight reality. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let reality be what it is, and keep walking. 9. The power of 108. Why the journey lasted exactly this long. Nothing about this pilgrimage was accidental. Not the route, not the pace, and certainly not the duration. 108 days. In Buddhism and several other Eastern spiritual traditions, the number 108 holds deep symbolic significance. It represents the 108 defilements, or mental impurities, that cloud the human mind. Things like attachment, jealousy, hatred, pride, and fear. A set of traditional Buddhist prayer beads called a mala contains exactly 108 beads, one for each defilement to be purified through practice. So, the Walk for Peace wasn't just a physical journey from Texas to Washington, D.C. It was structured as a moving meditation on purification itself. Each day, symbolically, it was one step closer to clearing the mental fog that keeps us stuck in cycles of reactivity and suffering. There's something practical hiding in this idea, even if you're not Buddhist. Setting a fixed, meaningful duration for a commitment changes how you relate to the difficulty inside it. I'm going to walk until I feel like stopping is a very different mental frame from I'm going to walk for 108 days, each one dedicated to dissolving one layer of the stuff that holds me back. The first is optional. The second is a vow, and vows have teeth. The monks weren't guessing their way across America. They had a map, not just geographic, but spiritual. And that map held them together through storms, injuries, exhaustion, and doubt. 10. Interbeing, the practice of knowing you're not alone, and a dog named Aloka. All right, we need to talk about the dog. One of the most beloved figures of the entire Walk for Peace wasn't a monk. It was a rescue dog from India named Aloka, which means light in Pali. Aloka was originally a street dog who joined the monks during an earlier pilgrimage in India back in 2022. He just started walking with them, and he never stopped. He crossed into the United States with the group and walked the entire route, through heat, rain, and snow, right alongside the monks. When he developed chronic leg injuries, the group arranged orthopedic surgery for him in January of 2026, and then he came back and kept going. Why does a dog matter in a video about Buddhist practices? Because Aloka is a living illustration of what the great Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing, the idea that no being exists in isolation. Everything is deeply interconnected. The monks didn't just tolerate the dog. They embraced his presence as a reminder that the walk wasn't theirs alone. Peace isn't something you achieve by yourself. It's something you build in relationship. With other humans, with animals, with the earth under your feet. And here's the science behind it. Studies have shown that interacting with animals reduces cortisol, the stress hormone, while increasing oxytocin, the bonding hormone. During months of extreme physical effort and social isolation on the road, Aloka wasn't just a mascot. He was a biological anchor for the group's emotional health. The monks could have viewed the dog as a burden, another mouth to feed, another body to care for on an already grueling journey. Instead, they saw him as a teacher. And maybe that's the most Buddhist thing about this entire story. So, 10 practices, some ancient, some almost supernatural, all of them real. Kankamana taught us that attention is the ultimate form of endurance. Breath synchronization showed us the engine that powers the body without burning it out. The Dhutanga Code revealed how deliberately embracing discomfort can reshape what we believe is possible. Eating once a day proved that less fuel, managed wisely, can carry you farther than excess ever will. Tummo lit a fire inside the body that winter couldn't extinguish. Lungompa turned the act of walking into something closer to flying. Upekkha, equanimity, built a mental fortress that neither praise nor pain could breach. Radical acceptance turned the loss of a leg into an offering rather than a tragedy. The framework of 108 days gave structure to something that could easily have felt endless. An interbeing, embodied by a street dog named Aloka, reminded everyone that no journey worth taking is ever walked alone. The monks arrived in Washington, D.C. on February 10, 2026. They delivered a petition for peace to the United States Congress at the National Cathedral. They had crossed rain, heat, cold, injury, and every kind of doubt the road could throw at them. And they arrived the way they left, calm, present, and walking. Maybe the lesson isn't that we need to walk 3,700 kilometers. Maybe it's that the practices these monks carry, practices that are free, available, and older than most civilizations, are tools we've been sleeping on, tools for dealing with pain, with uncertainty, or with the relentless noise of modern life. The monks don't keep these teachings secret. They walk them through the streets so the world can see. The question is whether we're paying attention. If this video made you think or feel something you didn't expect, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it. And the next time you take a walk, even just around your block, try something different. Feel your feet touch the ground. Match your breath to your steps. See what happens when you stop just moving and start arriving. Thanks for watching. Walk in peace.